How about, how do I make my own symbol? You think that's a good question? How do I make my own symbol? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this set since we saw how that works. At one time, I used to have an assignment where I had students illustrate diagrams, and we're on portraits now. I'm done with diagrams. There was another point in time where we illustrated flowers and fruits, and I'm done with that. I get tired of these assignments. But at one point, one of the diagrams that I had students illustrate were sandwiches, like an exploded view of a sandwich. And I thought they were pretty cool. I liked them. But I got sick and tired of seeing sandwiches. But one of the elements that is common on a piece of bread are sesame seeds, right? And they all generally look the same. It's kind of the same idea as the leaves that we were looking at. They all generally look the same, but they wouldn't be like perfect on the bun. They would be slightly rotated. Maybe some of them are slightly toasted, different colors, slightly different sizes. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to illustrate a sesame seed, and I'm going to store it as a symbol. Okay, so I just want you guys to watch. Part of my sort of my goal is for you to acquire an awareness of what the software can do. So I don't necessarily expect you to memorize this. I don't necessarily expect you to master drawing a sesame seed, but I think just watching and observing, you can realize how this tool might be applicable to something else that you're going to illustrate later, and you can use it as an analogy for whatever it is that you're constructing. So I'm going to draw a little sesame seed, and you'll notice I started off with an ellipse, and I'm grabbing the anchors with the direct select tool to modify it. So you can see if I move the anchors around, I can distort its shape. So I wanted to look like a little seed, so I took the ellipse, moved the anchors around, and that's what I have. And now I want to make it kind of have more of a sesame seed color fill. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a gradient to this, and we're going to look at gradients again in the near future. Whenever I apply a gradient, I like to start off with the black and white gradient. It's a default gradient, and it's very easy to customize. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the black and white one and tear away what's called the gradient panel, and I'm going to change the colors from black and white to probably yellow and brown, something that looks more like a sesame seed. So there's two types of gradients in Illustrator. There's a linear gradient, and then this one here is called a radial gradient. Looks like a circle. And then the gradient tool allows me to reapply it. So I'm just going to manipulate this gradient to try to get it to look more like a sesame seed. All right, there we go. And then let's add some color to this. I'm going to go with like this color here. So I'm drag and dropping these pre-existing colors into these little swatches on the gradient. So I'm just dragging and dropping them. I'm going to add a third color and make that one white, probably. Make it look like a little highlight. Offset it. Whoops.
Does it not work if you just click on the little box, double click to change the color, or do you have to?
So I can also double, you're right, there's numerous ways. I'm just dragging and dropping because I figured that would be easier to understand. But if I double click on these boxes, it opens up the pre-existing panel. I believe there's also a way to activate the eyedropper. I just don't remember the key combination. But I think that I can, and it will launch the eyedropper, and I can click on an image or something like that. But you're right. I can click on this, double click on this, and it launches the existing swatches. This right here will take me to my color panel where I can slide or sample colors from here. Okay. And like I said, we'll talk about this in greater detail later. But so here's my sesame seed. I've constructed it, I've illustrated it, and I want to turn this into a symbol. So this is similar to the experience that we had when we constructed a pattern. So when we made a pattern, we realized that the pattern or the size of the tile was based on the size of the object when I made it. How big it was when I dragged and dropped it, that's how big the tile was going to be. So this is true about the symbol as well. So this might be too big of a sesame seed. It looks really big to me. So I'm going to scale it down, make it a little bit smaller of what I sort of anticipate a seed being sized in my hypothetical illustration. Right? So I'm going to grab this vector and I'm going to drag and drop it into the symbol panel. And when I drag and drop it into the symbol panel, it says, well, what do you want to name your symbol? And I'm just going to say, okay, I'm going to name it a seed. And, you know, all of these features here are really more tied to other softwares in the Adobe Creative Cloud, specifically Flash, which is a deprecated software. So this is sort of preparing the symbol for being used outside of Illustrator. And I don't, see how it says Flash right there? So I don't expect to do that. I don't really care. Just go ahead and hit OK. So now that I've stored it, you'll notice that it's held here in my library of symbols. It's right there. All right, so let me click on this. I'm going to delete my original. You'll see it's still there. Even though I deleted my original, it's still there. So I'm going to go to the sprayer, and I'm going to spray sesame seeds. All right, so I got a bunch of sesame seeds. And now I'm going to rotate the sesame. Oops, let's scale, sorry. I'm going to rotate the sesame seeds. Remember, they're all going to be pointing in different directions. Different directions, different directions. Spin, spin, spin. So you can imagine these being on a bun, right? If it was a McDonald's bun, they'd be printed on or something like that. So, different sizes. Boop, 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 boop. I don't know. I think this tool is really cool. So, before this tool existed, what do you think we did when we illustrated stuff like this? We did this manually. We would make one object and then make a bunch of copies and then use transform and change its colors. It was a lot more time consuming. So while this isn't a tool that necessarily is going to make me a much better illustrator, it at least creates some efficiencies for me. Does that make sense? So it saves me a lot of time where I was doing a lot of these transformations and distortions manually. So there's my little collection of sesame seeds that would be pointing in different directions, different sizes. They have more of that organic quality that we were talking about earlier.